Billionaire CEO sees his ex with a baby at the airport. Days later, she's crying as she begs to find him. Daniel adjusted his watch as he moved through the busy airport terminal, blending into the usual rush of business travelers and families. Just another trip, just another day. Until his breath caught. Standing only a few steps ahead was her, Amelia, the woman who vanished from his life 3 years ago without a word. But this time, she wasn't alone. In her arms, wrapped tightly in a soft blue coat, was a little boy, no more than 3 years old. The child glanced up, and in that instant, Daniel froze. Those eyes, piercing, blue, unmistakably his. He stepped forward, heart pounding, ready to call her name, but before he could speak, Amelia turned away, melting into the crowd like a ghost slipping through his fingers. Daniel stood there, breathless, as his world tilted. "It can't be," he whispered. "But those eyes, I know those eyes." The soft hum of the private elevator rose like a distant heartbeat, steady but cold. As the doors slid open to the 48th floor, Daniel Brooks stepped into his penthouse, sleek glass steel beams and a panoramic view of the Manhattan skyline glowing beneath the twilight. His world. The empire he built. And yet, tonight the air inside felt heavier than usual. The image from the airport still haunted him. Amelia. And the boy. He loosened his tie, but the pressure in his chest didn't ease. Instead, his mind replayed every agonizing second like a loop he couldn't escape. 3 years. 3 years since she vanished from his life, leaving behind nothing but an empty apartment, a silent phone, and a message that tore through him like broken glass. "I'm sorry. I can't do this anymore." But today she was back. Not by choice, not by intention. By fate. His cell phone buzzed sharply on the marble counter, breaking the silence. It was Mark, his closest friend, his business partner, and the only person who knew the full storm raging inside him. Daniel picked up. "She's back," he said, voice hoarse. Mark didn't need him to explain further. "You're sure it was her?" "I would know her anywhere," Daniel whispered. "But that's not what's killing me." His throat tightened. "Mark, she had a child. A boy. And..." His voice cracked for a moment before he forced it out. "The kid has my eyes." Silence, heavy and loaded on the other end. "Jesus, Daniel. I tried to reach her. She saw me, panicked and ran." Daniel closed his eyes, gripping the edge of the counter. "I lost her. Again." "You can't let this go," Mark said firmly. "You need to find her, if that boy is yours." "I know." For a moment, Daniel saw it again. Those small hands clinging to Amelia's coat. Those blue irises shining under the fluorescent lights, mirroring his own every time he looked in the mirror. The Brooks eyes, rare, distinct, unmistakable. Daniel's jaw clenched. He hadn't slept in days, not since the airport, not since his world cracked open in ways he couldn't control. "Where would I even start?" he exhaled, feeling helpless. "She disappeared without a trace before. She can do it again." Mark's voice sharpened, pushing through his doubt like a blade. "You're Daniel Brooks. You own half this damned city. If anyone can find her, you can." But it wasn't that simple, not this time, because behind Amelia's disappearance wasn't just heartbreak, it was betrayal, confusion, and something deeper that had never made sense. Back then they were happy, or so he thought. They had shared small apartments and cheap takeout, late-night laughter in his earlier days of business when nothing was guaranteed. They dreamed together. She was there before the first billion-dollar deal, before the magazine covers, before the title Billionaire CEO ever followed his name. She was there when he was just Daniel, a man who had very little, but had her. Then one morning she was gone, without a fight, without a reason. But now she was back, with a secret he was never supposed to discover. Daniel crossed the living room and stood by the wall of glass, staring out at the glittering city. Every light felt like a distant star mocking him. Cold, unreachable. His mother's voice echoed faintly in his mind, sharp, cold, always calculated. "Some people will always be beneath you, Daniel. Learn to separate weakness from loyalty. He shook his head bitterly. That was Eleanor Brooks, the woman who raised him to be ruthless, the same woman who never once approved of Amelia, the same woman who might have known more than she ever let on. A low knock sounded at the door. Mark stood there, coat in hand, knowing his friend wouldn't sleep tonight. "Let's go," Mark said. "We're starting tonight." Daniel nodded once. No more waiting, no more what-ifs. If Amelia thought she could disappear again, she underestimated the man she left behind. Because this time, he wasn't letting her walk away without answers. They drove for hours north of the city, searching through every thread of information Daniel's private investigators could gather. Whispers of a woman who resembled Amelia renting a modest apartment in a small town 2 hours outside Manhattan. A town where no one would look for a woman once connected to a billionaire. Snow fell gently under the dim streetlights as they arrived, the streets quiet, almost frozen in time. Daniel sat in the parked car, staring at a small cafe across the street, breath fogging up the window. And then, there she was. Amelia. Her coat was the same pale gray she wore at the airport. Her eyes darted nervously around the street, as if still running from invisible shadows. Beside her, holding her hand tightly, was the boy, his son. Daniel didn't need a paternity test to feel it. His blood recognized his own. Mark placed a hand on his shoulder. "This is your moment." Daniel's pulse hammered in his ears as he stepped out of the car, crossing the icy road toward the woman who both broke him and still somehow held every piece of his heart. She turned. Their eyes met, and the world around them vanished. Chapter 1. The Eyes That Haunt Me. The steam from Daniel's untouched coffee curled like silent ghosts above the rim of his cup. He sat rigid at the long oak table in his Manhattan penthouse study, eyes locked on the city skyline beyond the glass wall. The sun was beginning its descent, casting long golden streaks that cut across the towers like blades. But his mind wasn't in the present. It was trapped in that moment at the airport. Her face, her eyes, and the boy. Amelia Green. It had been 3 years since she left. 3 years since her text message shattered everything. "I'm sorry, Daniel, I can't do this anymore." There were no explanations, no closure, no warning. Just silence. And yet, despite the betrayal, despite the bitterness that followed, he never truly stopped wondering why she left. But yesterday, everything changed. She was back. The door behind him creaked open, pulling him from his spiraling thoughts. Mark Thompson entered, his best friend and business partner, holding 2 whiskey glasses. "Still no sleep?" Mark asked, though he already knew the answer. Daniel didn't respond right away. His jaw clenched, his throat tightening as the image resurfaced. "She had a child," Daniel whispered finally. "A boy." Mark lowered into the chair across from him, eyes narrowing. "And you think?" "I don't think, Mark." Daniel's voice sharpened. "I know." His hand trembled slightly as he reached for the glass. "The boy. He has my eyes." Mark exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair. "Daniel, listen, you've been through hell since she left. Are you sure you're not seeing what you want to see?" Daniel's head snapped up, eyes burning with something between fury and desperation. "You weren't there, you didn't see him. It's not a coincidence. Those eyes, they only exist in my family. My grandfather had them. My father, me." His voice cracked slightly, and now him. Mark sat back, studying him carefully. "Have you tried to approach her, talk to her?" Daniel let out a bitter laugh, hollow and sharp. "I tried. The moment she saw me, she ran, like a ghost fleeing the light." His voice dropped into a rasp. "I chased her. God, Mark, I ran through that damn terminal like a lunatic. But she disappeared." Mark swirled the amber liquid in his glass, his voice calm but firm. "If that child is yours, you can't let this go." Mark leaned forward, voice steady, grounded. "Then we start tonight. Private investigators, contacts, whatever it takes. She vanished once, but not this time. Not with your resources." Daniel nodded, though the knot in his chest only grew tighter. "She's hiding for a reason. Maybe your mother," Mark's voice lowered, cautious. The mention of Eleanor Brooks sent a sharp, involuntary chill through Daniel's spine. His mother, the queen of cold calculations, the master puppeteer behind more than one ruined life. Amelia had been terrified of her once. Daniel's voice hardened. If my mother had anything to do with this, he stopped himself, exhaling through his teeth. I'll find out. Mark gave a small nod, understanding the weight of that statement. You always do. Silence fell between them, thick, pulsing with unspoken history. Daniel stared out once more at the glittering city that now felt foreign and meaningless. 3 years ago, he would have given up everything to have Amelia beside him. Her smile softened the sharp edges of his world. Her laughter filled the cold emptiness of these rooms. She believed in him when his empire was still being built brick by brick. And now, somewhere out there, she was raising a child who might be his. Without him. The thought made his stomach twist. Later that evening, Daniel found himself pacing his penthouse study, the city shimmering beneath him like a sea of distant stars. But none of it could calm him. His mind was at war, regret, and fear. Why hadn't she told him? Why had she stolen those years from him? From their child? His phone buzzed. It was Mark again. We found something, Mark said. It's not much, but it's a start. Daniel's heart jumped. Where? Small town, 2 hours north, quiet place. She rented an apartment there a year ago. No social media, low profile, barely leaves the town. But one of my contacts at a coffee shop recognized her photo. Daniel's jaw tightened. She was running. Yes. Mark paused. And she didn't want to be found. Daniel's voice turned cold. She doesn't have that choice anymore. He grabbed his coat, moving toward the elevator. I'm going there. Mark's voice followed through the speaker. Do you want backup? Daniel stopped for a beat. No, not this time. The drive was long, the roads winding through quiet suburbs that blurred under the weight of his racing thoughts. His grip on the wheel was tight, his knuckles pale. The pain in his chest was more than betrayal. It was the realization of how much time he had already lost. 3 years. 3 birthdays, 3 Christmases. First words, first steps. Gone. When he finally pulled into the sleepy town, snowflakes had begun to fall, dusting the rooftops and quiet streets in white. The cafe was small, tucked beneath an old brick building, its neon sign flickering. He parked across the street, heart hammering as he spotted her inside. There she was. Amelia. Still beautiful, still familiar. But different. Her long dark hair framed her face, though now there was a weariness beneath her eyes, the exhaustion of motherhood, of years spent carrying a secret too heavy for one person. And there, beside her, was the boy, his son. Daniel felt his chest constrict. The little boy was playing with a small toy truck, oblivious to the storm building only a few feet away. His head lifted for a moment, and once again those piercing blue eyes met Daniel's through the frosted window. Daniel swallowed hard. His feet moved on their own as he crossed the street. His entire world shrank down to these few feet, to this moment. Amelia looked up. Her eyes locked on his. Time stopped. She froze, her entire body going still as fear flashed across her face. She stood quickly, instinctively placing herself between Daniel and the boy. Daniel's voice came out barely above a whisper. Amelia. Her lips parted, but no words came. Only breath. You've been hiding from me for 3 years. His voice shook. Not anymore. Her voice finally trembled out, shaky, breaking. Daniel, please, not here. His eyes shifted to the child. Is he mine? Tears filled her eyes, but she said nothing. Her silence was answer enough. Daniel felt his world tilt again. The eyes that haunted him for weeks, they weren't haunting him anymore. They were calling him father. Chapter 2, The Search Begins. The following morning, the sunlight pierced through Daniel's penthouse like sharp knives, slicing into his restless mind. Sleep had been a distant fantasy. Even with the answers standing just a few feet from him last night, the questions inside him only multiplied. She ran again. After their brief exchange outside that small-town cafe, Amelia had rushed out. leaving him standing on the snow-dusted sidewalk with nothing but the image of that little boy's face burned into his soul. Daniel rubbed his temples as Mark entered the study, holding 2 steaming cups of black coffee. "She's scared, Daniel," Mark said calmly, handing him one of the cups. We both saw it. Daniel's jaw clenched. Scared of what? Of me? Of the truth? Or of what my mother might do if she finds out? Mark sat across from him, studying his friend. Maybe all of it. Daniel stared out at the skyline once more, the city stretching far beyond his glass fortress, cold and indifferent. "I don't care what drove her away, Mark," he said softly but firmly. "I care about my son. I've lost 3 years I can never get back. I'm not losing another day." Mark nodded. "Then we start digging properly." He pulled out a thin folder, laying it on the marble coffee table between them. "I've had my people working overnight." Daniel flipped open the folder, his sharp eyes scanning every page. Rental applications, credit card statements, bank records, utility bills, doctor visits, school enrollments under an alias. Amelia Green had carefully covered her tracks, but not perfectly. "She's been living quietly," Mark continued. "Cash jobs mostly, some under-the-table bookkeeping work at a few local businesses. No paper trail leading back to you, no major medical bills that would have triggered flags." Daniel's fingers traced over a printout of a preschool enrollment form. Leo Green. His heart twisted at the name. His son. "No father listed on the birth certificate," Mark added quietly. Daniel exhaled heavily. "Of course not." He flipped to the final page, a blurry photo captured from a traffic camera. Amelia's car. And Leo strapped in his car seat behind her, wide-eyed, looking directly at the camera lens. Daniel froze. Mark watched him carefully. "That's your son, Daniel." Daniel's voice was barely audible. "I know." For a long moment, neither man spoke. The weight of what was coming settled heavily in the room between them. 2 hours later, Daniel stood outside his private security firm's headquarters, an unmarked building on the Upper East Side, shielded behind layers of discretion. Mark had arranged everything. Inside, several investigators were already working. Files, maps, photos pinned across a large corkboard like pieces of a giant puzzle. One of the lead agents, a man named Harper, approached. "Mr. Brooks, we've mapped out her entire routine. She's kept a strict schedule for the last 6 months." Harper pointed at a calendar pinned to the wall. "She drops Leo off at preschool Monday through Friday 8:15 a.m. sharp, works part-time at the bookstore on Main Street, grocery runs on Wednesdays, doctor's visits on the second Tuesday of every month. No social activity, no extended family listed nearby." Daniel's eyes narrowed. "Any visitors? Any men?" "None. She lives like a ghost, sir. She's taken every precaution not to draw attention." Daniel studied the map for several long seconds, then looked Harper in the eye. "I want to see her," he said. "Not just through files or photos. I need to see her, and him, in person." Harper hesitated slightly. "We can arrange that. But if I may, Mr. Brooks, don't push too fast. If she feels cornered, she may disappear again." Daniel's jaw tensed. "Then we make sure she doesn't have to run." By Thursday, Daniel was back in the small town, his car parked discreetly down the street from Leo's preschool. Through the frosted glass windows, he saw him again. Leo, laughing, chasing other kids in the playground, his little legs stumbled and ran, his small hands gripping a bright red ball. Daniel felt his chest tighten painfully. So many firsts he had missed. So many moments he should have shared. Mark's voice buzzed through the earpiece. "Daniel, don't go to him directly. You said you wanted to approach this carefully." "I know," Daniel whispered, forcing himself to stay in the car. His knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. Minutes later, Amelia arrived, bundled against the cold, scarf wrapped tightly around her neck. She waved as Leo ran into her arms, giggling. She scooped him up effortlessly, pressing a kiss to his cheek, whispering something that made him laugh again. Daniel watched silently, his heart aching with both longing and fury. This was his son, his blood. And yet, he was still a stranger to him. Later that evening, Daniel and Mark met again inside a dimly lit corner of an exclusive private club in Manhattan. "She's not going to come to you, Daniel," Mark said, swirling his whiskey. "Not willingly." Daniel's stare was hard. "Then I'll go to her." "And risk her running again?" Daniel exhaled, leaning back. "Mark, I can't stand here and watch my son grow up from behind a glass window, like some kind of criminal. I won't let her steal any more years from me." Mark was silent for a moment before finally nodding. "Then you need to be ready for whatever comes next." Daniel's voice dropped into a low promise. "I already am." For Daniel Brooks, this wasn't about control. It wasn't about power. It was about time. Time stolen. Time lost. Time he was going to fight to reclaim, no matter what it cost him. Because somewhere out there his son was sleeping tonight. And Daniel was done watching from a distance. Chapter 3. The Confrontation. The cafe smelled faintly of cinnamon and fresh bread as the bell above the door jingled. It was small, almost too small for the weight of what was about to happen. Daniel stepped inside, his pulse loud in his ears. He had waited for days, watched from afar, followed Amelia's careful, quiet routines. But not tonight. Tonight, there would be no more distance, no more silence. She was already there, seated near the back corner, alone. Her eyes were tired, the kind of exhaustion that clings to a person who's carried too much for too long. She held a small cup between her hands, fingers wrapped tightly around the ceramic, as if grounding herself. Daniel stood for a moment, watching her. 3 years. He hadn't forgotten the curve of her shoulders, the soft line of her jaw, or the way her hair always framed her face like a gentle curtain. But what shook him most was how familiar she still felt, and how much she tried to disappear inside herself. As if sensing him, Amelia glanced up and froze. Her entire body stiffened as their eyes locked. Fear flickered across her face, followed by something harder to read. Guilt, perhaps. Regret. 1,000 emotions behind guarded eyes. Daniel didn't move. Neither did she. The cafe fell into a strange silence around them, as if the world itself paused, holding its breath. Finally, Amelia stood, her breath shaky, whispering, "Daniel." Her voice was thinner than he remembered, almost fragile. He stepped forward, keeping his tone even but firm. "We need to talk." Her eyes darted toward the door, as if calculating an escape, but there was none. Not this time. "Not here," she whispered, "please." "I don't care where, Amelia." His voice dipped lower. "But you're not walking away again." Her lips trembled, her fingers tightening around the strap of her purse. "Daniel, you don't understand." "Then help me understand." He paused. "Why did you run? Why have you been hiding for 3 years? And most importantly," his voice cracked slightly, "why didn't you tell me about him?" The mention of Leo made her flinch visibly. Her eyes glistened. "Daniel, please." His voice sharpened, heavier now with months of bottled rage and heartbreak. "Is he mine?" The words hung between them like a loaded gun. Amelia swallowed, her chest rising and falling. For a brief second, Daniel saw the flicker of the girl he once knew, the one who used to whisper her dreams to him in the dark. "Yes," she finally whispered. The word barely escaped her lips. "He's yours." Daniel's breath hitched, as if he'd been punched. Even though he knew it deep down, hearing it spoken aloud shattered something inside him. "How long have you known?" His voice was quieter now, raw. "Since the beginning," she admitted. His jaw clenched as he stepped closer. "And you never thought to tell me? You kept my son from me?" Tears pooled in her eyes, but she blinked them back. "I didn't want to hurt you." "Hurt me?" he repeated, his voice breaking. "You think this didn't hurt? You stole 3 years from me, Amelia. 3 years I'll never get back." "I didn't have a choice," she whispered desperately. "You always had a choice," Daniel fired back. Amelia shook her head, her voice finally rising. "Your mother made sure I didn't." Those words stopped him cold. For a brief moment, neither of them breathed. Daniel's eyes narrowed. "What are you talking about?" Amelia glanced around the room, lowering her voice as if Eleanor Brooks herself might be listening. When I found out I was pregnant, I tried to tell you, but she came to me first. She told me you didn't want me anymore, that you had moved on, that I was a problem." Daniel's entire body stiffened, his fists curling. "That's a lie. I know that now," she whispered, voice cracking. "But I didn't know it then. She offered me money to disappear, to make it easier for everyone." Daniel's face twisted in disbelief. His mother. His own mother. The cold manipulations, the lies, it all made sense now. The sudden silence, the confusion, the years of unanswered questions. His voice turned into a bitter growl. "You believed her." "I was terrified, Daniel," she snapped, tears finally spilling. "I was young, pregnant, and she made sure I felt small and worthless. She made me believe walking away was better for you, for your career, for your life." Daniel shook his head slowly, his voice dropping to a whisper. "She didn't take my son from me, Amelia. You did." The weight of his words sent Amelia reeling. For a long moment they stood locked in a fragile silence, their hearts breaking all over again under the weight of everything unsaid. Finally, Daniel inhaled sharply, his voice steadier. "Where is he?" Amelia wiped her tears, her voice trembling. "At home, he's sleeping." Daniel stepped back, pain flashing across his face. "I need to see him. I need to see my son." Amelia hesitated, but something in her eyes shifted, perhaps knowing she couldn't run anymore. Not after tonight. "Come with me," she whispered. The drive was short but unbearably silent. When they reached the small apartment complex, Daniel's chest tightened at how simple, how painfully small, the home was. This was where she had raised his child, alone, while he lived in penthouses and boardrooms. Inside, the apartment smelled faintly of lavender. Soft music played from a small radio near the kitchen. Simple furniture, warm lighting. A home filled with quiet love and quiet struggle. Daniel stood frozen as Amelia led him to the small bedroom. She opened the door softly. There he was. Leo, asleep in a tiny bed, hugging a worn stuffed bear tightly to his chest. His small chest rose and fell peacefully, his face angelic in sleep. Daniel knelt beside the bed, staring at the boy. His son. For the first time, without distance or shadows between them. The child's features were undeniable, the shape of his chin, the tiny dimple in his left cheek, and those piercing blue eyes, now closed in perfect innocence. Daniel's voice trembled in a whisper. "She's perfect." Amelia stood behind him, silent, her tears falling freely now. Daniel gently reached out, brushing his hand softly over Leo's dark hair, his throat closing with emotion. His fingers shook as he whispered again, more to himself than anyone else. Echoed. "I've already missed too much of his life. I won't miss any more." Chapter 4. The Mother's Secret. The room was still. Only the soft hum of the heater filled the silence as Daniel sat in Amelia's small living room, his hands clasped tightly between his knees. Across from him, Amelia stood near the window, staring into the night like it might somehow offer her an escape. But there was no more running. Not tonight. Neither spoke for a long time. The weight between them was crushing, like something sacred had been shattered, and both were afraid to touch the broken pieces. Finally, Daniel's voice broke through the tension, low and controlled, but shaking beneath the surface. "How long were you planning to keep hiding?" Amelia turned slowly, her eyes glossy but calm. "I don't know," she paused, voice faltering. "Part of me always knew this moment would come. But I didn't know how to face you." Daniel stood abruptly, pacing across the tiny space that felt too small to hold the storm building inside him. "You should have called me," he hissed, his voice sharpening. "You should have fought. You should have told me the truth." Her voice cracked as she tried to hold her ground. "I tried, Daniel. I tried so many times, but your mother..." He spun toward her. "Tell me everything." Amelia's hands trembled as she pulled her cardigan tightly around her, like armor that could barely contain the memory. "The day I found out I was pregnant, I was terrified, but hopeful. You were so busy with Brooks Capital, you were building your empire. I didn't want to distract you, but I knew you deserved to know." She swallowed hard, her voice thinning. I made an appointment to meet you at your office, but the morning of, she showed up. Daniel's jaw tightened. My mother. Amelia nodded, the memory still sharp in her mind. She was waiting for me outside your building, like she had planned it. She asked me to go for coffee. Amelia's eyes flashed with pain. At first, she was polite, too polite. She smiled, told me how much she respected what we had, but that she needed to be realistic. Daniel's stomach twisted. He could practically hear Eleanor's cold, measured voice. Amelia's own voice turned bitter. She told me you had moved on, that you were seeing someone else, that you were preparing for a different life, one where I didn't fit. She said the child would ruin everything for you, that you had enough on your plate running Brooks Capital without dragging a scandal behind you. Daniel exhaled sharply, his hands curling into fists. I never said any of that. I know that now, she whispered, but back then I was scared, and she was convincing. She threatened you? He demanded. Tears welled up again in Amelia's eyes. She didn't have to. She made me feel like I was the threat, that if I stayed I would ruin everything you'd worked for. Daniel stared at her, barely breathing, his chest tightening with rage. Not at Amelia, but at the cold hand behind it all. My own mother made sure I lost my child before I even knew he existed. She offered me money to disappear quietly, enough to start fresh somewhere else. She said I could avoid the tabloids, the judgment, the humiliation. Amelia wiped a tear falling down her cheek. I didn't take a single dollar, but I left. Daniel's voice trembled. And you believed she was speaking for me? I was 25, she whispered, voice raw. I was scared, I had nothing but you, and she convinced me I didn't even have that anymore. Daniel fell back into the worn couch, running his hands over his face. He had suspected his mother's involvement, but hearing the full truth unraveled something much darker inside him. The control, the manipulation, the betrayal, reaching deeper than he'd ever imagined. She stole everything from me, Amelia, he said hoarsely. She stole our future. Amelia closed her eyes. She stole mine, too. They sat there for a long time, two people broken in different ways, both victims of the same icy woman who always got what she wanted. Finally, Daniel looked up, his voice stronger now. She's not going to steal another minute. Amelia's eyes widened slightly, uncertain. Daniel. He stood, the fire behind his eyes burning brighter now. You don't have to be afraid anymore, not of her, not of what happens next. I'm going to fight for my son, and for you. Amelia's lips trembled. Daniel, I can't go through another war with your family. I don't have the strength for it. You won't have to, he said, his voice fierce but steady. I'll handle my mother. She shook her head, panic rising. You don't know what she's capable of. Oh, I know exactly what she's capable of, Daniel snapped. I grew up watching her destroy people. I spent my entire life believing that was the only way to survive. His chest heaved. But not anymore. She won't touch you, or Leo, ever again. For the first time in years, Amelia looked at him differently. Not like a billionaire, not like the man she once feared might abandon her, but like the man who once whispered his dreams to her late at night. Just Daniel. And for the first time, something deep inside her dared to hope. Hours later, back in Manhattan, Daniel stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse. He could feel his mother's cold presence even without her standing there. Eleanor Brooks had always made herself larger than life. Her voice, her rules, her control. But now she had crossed a line that even Daniel could no longer tolerate. He lifted his phone and dialed. Her voice answered on the second ring. Well, this is a surprise, Daniel. No more games, Mother, he said, his voice razor sharp. We need to talk. Chapter 5. The Battle with Eleanor. The Brooks estate sat like a fortress on the edge of Long Island, its towering stone facade illuminated by rows of manicured lights, as if mocking anyone foolish enough to challenge the power behind its gates. Daniel had walked these halls hundreds of times before, but tonight every step felt heavier, colder, as if the house itself could sense what was coming. The butler greeted him with the same forced politeness, leading him through the marble entryway toward the sitting room, where Eleanor Brooks waited. She was already seated, a crystal glass of white wine perfectly poised between her fingers, not a hair out of place, not a wrinkle in her posture. The queen upon her throne. "Daniel," she smiled, polite and sharp. "I didn't expect a personal visit tonight. How refreshing." He stood across from her, refusing to sit, his hands in the pockets of his coat as if bracing himself. "We both know why I'm here." Her smile didn't fade. She sipped her wine, as calm as ever. "Do we?" Daniel's jaw clenched. "You knew where Amelia was all along." Eleanor's eyes glittered. "I knew where she wasn't. She wasn't beside you, where she never truly belonged." "You lied to her." His voice rose slightly but controlled. "You cornered her. You threatened her into running." She set her glass down gently. "I offered her options. She made her choice." "You manipulated her," Daniel spat. "You robbed me of 3 years with my son." Eleanor arched an eyebrow. "Your son?" She laughed softly, as though amused. "Daniel, you were never meant to have a child with her. That was never part of the plan. You were destined for more, for better." "For better?" His voice cracked. "You mean for you, for your legacy, for your image." "I mean for this family's survival," she said coldly. "Do you have any idea how vulnerable you would have been with her at your side? That girl would have destroyed everything you've built." Daniel's chest heaved as anger surged through him. "I built this, Mother, not you. And the only thing that almost destroyed me was losing them." Eleanor's smile finally faltered, ever so slightly. Daniel stepped closer, his voice dropping into a razor-sharp whisper. "Leo is my son, my flesh and blood, and you will never touch him, never interfere. Not now, not ever again." Her eyes narrowed. "And if I do?" He smiled bitterly. "Then I will destroy everything you hold dear." Eleanor's laugh returned, a sharp sound echoing through the vast room. "Don't be so dramatic, Daniel. You forget, I made you. Without me, you wouldn't be standing where you are." "No," Daniel said softly. "I'm standing here in spite of you." Their eyes locked. Two powerful forces, bound by blood, but now fully divided by truth. "You taught me how to fight, Mother. How to crush anyone who threatened what mattered." His voice hardened. "And right now the only threat is you." The room pulsed with tension. "You forget yourself," Eleanor whispered, her voice suddenly colder. "I know every secret buried in this family. You may think you're in control, but I built this empire long before you inherited its throne." Daniel smiled coldly. "Then you know exactly how far I'm willing to go to protect what's mine. If you so much as breathe near Amelia or Leo again, I will burn this family name to the ground. I will tear open every secret you've hidden, every deal, every scandal, every skeleton, and I will hand them to the press myself." Eleanor's face finally shifted. Her smile cracked. For the first time in years, Daniel saw it, the faint flicker of uncertainty behind her perfectly curated exterior. "Is that a threat, Daniel?" she whispered. "No," he replied calmly. "That's a promise." For a moment, neither moved. The air itself seemed to freeze. Finally, Eleanor leaned back into her chair, composing herself. She picked up her wine once again and took a slow, measured sip. "I see." Her voice softened, but the venom remained beneath it. "You've grown teeth, my darling. I almost respect it." Daniel stepped back, his voice steady as steel. "This conversation is over." He turned to leave, but her final words followed him like a dagger. "You may win this round, Daniel, but don't mistake my silence for surrender." He paused briefly in the doorway, looking back at her one last time. "I don't need your surrender, Mother," his voice dropped. "I just need your distance." And with that, he walked out, leaving behind the cold, gilded palace that once raised him, and stepping fully into the war he was prepared to fight. Chapter 6: Building Trust with My Son. The first time Daniel stood face to face with his son while awake, he could barely breathe. Leo looked up at him with a mixture of curiosity and quiet caution. The child's small fingers clutched the edge of the playground slide as Amelia knelt beside him, softly coaxing, "It's okay, sweetheart, this is Daniel." "Daniel. Not Daddy. Not Father. Just Daniel." He swallowed the knot in his throat. Leo's bright blue eyes blinked up at him, so familiar yet untouched by the weight pressing against Daniel's chest. 3 years had been stolen. 3 birthdays, 3 sets of tiny shoes outgrown, 3 first words never heard. And yet, here he was, small, healthy, beautiful. Daniel crouched slowly to Leo's level, his voice steady but warm. "Hey, buddy." His smile was faint, unsure. "It's really nice to finally meet you." Leo didn't respond, but he didn't run either. Instead, he simply tilted his head, studying Daniel like a puzzle he hadn't yet figured out. Amelia watched them both carefully from the bench, her entire body tense. Every instinct in her was still braced, still afraid to fully trust that Daniel was truly here and staying. Daniel sensed it all. He didn't force himself on Leo. He simply stayed, sitting cross-legged in the playground sand, watching as the boy kicked at a small pile of dirt beside him. After a few minutes, Leo glanced at him again. "Are you Mommy's friend?" his little voice asked. Daniel's lips parted, momentarily caught off guard. "Something like that," he smiled softly. I care a lot about your mommy." Leo nodded seriously as only a child could, then looked back down at his sand. Daniel fought the sting in his chest. His son didn't know who he was, yet. But this was where it would begin. Over the next few weeks, Daniel returned to the small town almost daily. Sometimes he would take Leo for walks with Amelia. Sometimes they sat together in the bookstore where she worked, quietly sharing picture books while Amelia shelved inventory. Slowly, carefully, Daniel allowed Leo to set the pace. Leo would talk about everything, his toy cars, his favorite animals, how much he loved grilled cheese, and Daniel listened to every word like it was gold. But every night, when the visits ended, Daniel would return to his penthouse, collapsing under the weight of both joy and guilt. The contrast between his lavish world and Leo's tiny apartment gnawed at him. He had spent years building Brooks Capital, buying skyscrapers, closing billion-dollar mergers, but none of it filled the space where these stolen years had been. One afternoon at the park, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky with gold, Leo did something Daniel wasn't prepared for. He reached up, tiny hand open. "Can you push me on the swing?" Daniel froze for a heartbeat, the simple request piercing him deeper than any boardroom battle. "Of course, buddy." His voice cracked as he gently lifted Leo onto the swing and began pushing, careful, steady. Leo giggled as the swing soared higher, his small face lit up with pure delight. "Higher, Daniel." Daniel laughed softly, his heart breaking and healing at the same time. "All right, a little higher." Behind him, Amelia watched silently, her arms crossed, but her face softer than before. The wall inside her was still there, but cracks were beginning to show. After several minutes, Leo finally slowed. Daniel caught the swing gently as it swayed, steadying his son. "You're really strong," Leo said seriously. Daniel smiled, brushing Leo's hair away from his eyes. "Well, I've been practicing." Leo stared at him thoughtfully, his little mind processing something quietly. "You kind of talk like me." Daniel laughed, surprised. "I do?" Leo nodded, with that innocent honesty only children have. Fast, serious. Daniel's chest warmed. "Maybe that's because we're a little alike." Leo grinned, completely unaware of how much truth sat inside those words. Later that evening, as Daniel walked Amelia to her apartment door, the air between them grew heavier. "You're doing well with him," she said quietly. Her voice carried a cautious warmth that hadn't been there weeks ago. He likes you." Daniel looked at her softly. "I'm trying. I know it's not much, but I want to be here, Amelia. I know you do." She hesitated, opening the door halfway, lingering in the frame like she wanted to say more, but Daniel's voice lowered. "Amelia, I meant what I said. I'm not going anywhere." Her eyes glistened, but she quickly looked away. "It's not just about you staying, it's about how long you'll stay." Daniel exhaled slowly. "I'm not asking you to believe my words tonight. I just want you to see it for yourself." Amelia's throat tightened, her voice small. "I don't know how to stop being scared, Daniel." He stepped forward slightly, not touching her, but close enough that she could feel his sincerity. "Then let me help you unlearn it, one day at a time." They stood there for a moment in quiet understanding, two people standing on fragile ground, both daring to hope, but afraid to fall. "Good night, Daniel," she whispered finally. "Good night, Amelia." As the door softly closed, Daniel stood outside for a long while, staring at the quiet apartment behind it. He knew he couldn't erase the past, but if he had any say in it, he would fight for every day of their future. Chapter 7. Amelia's Fear. The apartment was quiet after Daniel left, but Amelia couldn't relax. She stood in the darkened kitchen, one hand resting on the counter, the other pressed gently against her chest. The rhythmic ticking of the wall clock was the only sound that filled the stillness, amplifying the steady, anxious drumbeat inside her own body. Leo was asleep, his soft breaths audible from the bedroom down the hall. But Amelia couldn't sleep. She hadn't slept well in weeks. Not since Daniel came back into their lives. It should have felt like a relief, like a blessing, like the impossible had finally been repaired. Instead, it terrified her. Daniel had kept his word. Every day he came. Every day he showed up, gentle and patient. He never pushed Leo, never forced his way into their routines. And Leo had grown to adore him so quickly. She watched it happen in real time. How Leo's eyes lit up when Daniel arrived at the door. How he would tug at Daniel's hand at the park. How he giggled freely when Daniel pushed him on the swings, or how they whispered silly stories during their bookstore visits. Her son didn't even realize what was happening. How could he? To Leo, Daniel was simply Daniel, the kind, funny man who always showed up with new stories, funny voices, and patient smiles. But to Amelia, he was so much more. He was the man who once promised to build a life with her, the man who disappeared from her world not by choice, but by manipulation. And now he was back, not as the billionaire, not as the man on magazine covers, but as a father who had lost too much time. And yet, every moment that Daniel grew closer to Leo only made the fear twist tighter inside her. Because what if this didn't last? The next morning, Amelia sat across from her best friend Claire at the small corner cafe they often met at. Claire stirred her coffee slowly, her eyes gentle but knowing. "So he's really been coming every day?" Amelia nodded, staring into her own untouched cup. "Every single day. And he's good with Leo." "Too good," Amelia whispered. Claire raised an eyebrow. "Too good? Isn't that what you wanted?" "That's the problem," Amelia confessed, her voice breaking. "It's everything I wanted, but it's also everything I'm terrified to lose." Claire reached out, squeezing her hand. "Amelia, you can't keep punishing him for what happened before. He didn't know." "I know that," Amelia's voice trembled. "But you don't understand what happens if he changes his mind again. If he gets tired of small-town life. If the pressure of his world pulls him back. Leo's never known heartbreak. I won't be the one to let him experience it." Claire's voice softened. "You can't protect Leo from everything." "But I can protect him from this," Amelia whispered, tears stinging her eyes. "I can't watch my son fall in love with his father only to lose him again." Claire gave her a sad smile. "Maybe you're not just scared for Leo. Maybe you're scared for yourself, too." Amelia looked away, her throat tightening. Because Claire was right. That evening, Daniel arrived as usual, knocking gently on the door at the same time he always did. Amelia opened it slowly, her face carefully neutral. "Hey," she said softly. Daniel smiled. "Hey, I brought him the puzzle he was talking about yesterday." As if on cue, Leo ran from his room, arms wide. Daniel knelt, catching him mid-run and lifting him into his arms with ease. The boy's laughter echoed warmly through the apartment. Amelia stood back, watching them, her heart swelling and aching all at once. This scene was everything she had dreamed of, and everything she feared. After dinner, when Leo had finally fallen asleep, Daniel lingered, standing near the door but not ready to leave yet. Amelia crossed her arms, the silence thick between them. Daniel broke it first. "You're scared?" She looked up, startled by his bluntness. "What?" "You're scared," he repeated gently. "I can see it in your eyes every time I walk in, every time I hold him, every time he laughs." Amelia opened her mouth, but no words came. Daniel stepped closer, his voice low and careful. "I know I don't deserve your trust yet, and I know you've carried all of this alone for far too long. But Amelia," his voice faltered, "I'm not going anywhere. I swear to you." Her lips trembled. "You say that now, and I'll keep saying it until you believe me," he promised. "I'm not the man your fears keep trying to see. I was robbed of those years just like you were, but I won't be robbed of what comes next." Tears filled her eyes. "It's not that simple, Daniel." "It never is," he whispered. "But that doesn't make it any less real." She pressed her hand to her mouth, fighting the sob building in her throat. Daniel didn't step closer. He simply stood, giving her the space she needed, but offering his presence like an anchor. Finally, her voice barely escaped. "I don't know how to trust you again." Daniel nodded softly. "Then let me earn it." The silence hung between them, thick with unsaid words, but not without hope. For the first time, Amelia didn't close the door when he left. Chapter 8. The Custody War. The envelope was thick, heavy, weighted not by paper but by the storm it carried inside. Daniel stared at it as it lay unopened on the polished wood of his penthouse dining table. It had arrived that morning, hand-delivered by a law clerk from his mother's legal team. No return address, no warm introduction. Just cold, precise intimidation wrapped in white paper. Mark stood nearby, watching his friend like a man bracing for an explosion. "Open it." Daniel's jaw tightened. "I already know what's inside." But still, he sliced it open. The legal documents slid out in a neat stack. Custody petition, court summons, formal accusations, and at the top, his mother's name. Eleanor Brooks. Mark read over Daniel's shoulder, his breath sharp. She actually did it. Daniel's voice was calm, but laced with ice. She never backs down. The document accused both Daniel and Amelia of being unfit parents. Eleanor was demanding full custody of Leo, using the child's best interest as her legal shield. It was war. When Daniel arrived at Amelia's apartment that evening, her face told him she already knew. She stood near the window, arms wrapped tightly around herself, as if trying to hold her world together. "She served me too," she whispered, her voice brittle. Daniel stepped toward her, his voice softer than she expected. "We'll fight this." "She's accusing me of negligence," Amelia's voice broke. "She says I ran away to hide Leo from you, that I deprived him of his father, that I'm unstable. She's trying to make me look like a criminal." Daniel closed the space between them, gently placing his hands on her arms. "She's lying, Amelia, and I won't let her win." Tears welled in her eyes. "You don't understand what she's capable of. She'll destroy me, Daniel. She'll destroy both of us. She's already done it once." Daniel's jaw clenched. Not this time. Amelia looked up at him, her voice cracking under the weight of her panic. "And what if she does? What if she takes him from us?" Daniel's voice dropped into something deeper, steadier. "Then I burn everything she built." Within hours, Daniel activated every legal resource at his disposal. His attorneys worked around the clock gathering documentation: Leo's birth certificate, Amelia's employment history, Leo's medical records, school reports, personal statements from teachers, neighbors, even pediatricians who vouched for Amelia's fitness as a mother. But Eleanor's team was equally ruthless. She painted Amelia as reckless, irresponsible, emotionally unstable. She argued that Daniel had been kept in the dark for years. Therefore, Leo deserved stability under her care as the family matriarch. "She's playing long-term reputation," Mark explained as they studied Eleanor's strategy late one night. "She knows you have wealth and power, but she's counting on public perception. If she frames Amelia as an unstable single mother and you as a distracted CEO, she positions herself as the calm, steady guardian." Daniel's eyes narrowed. "She forgets one thing." Mark raised a brow. "What's that?" "I'm not that same obedient son anymore." The first hearing was scheduled within weeks. Amelia had never stepped inside a courtroom in her life. As she walked beside Daniel toward the towering courthouse steps, she fought the wave of nausea rising in her chest. Daniel reached for her hand, gripping it tightly. "You're not alone." Inside, Eleanor sat with her army of attorneys, flawless, composed, as if she were attending a charity luncheon instead of fighting to steal her own grandson. When the judge entered, the room fell still. Daniel's attorney stood first, laying out their case with calm precision. That Amelia had raised Leo in a stable, loving environment. That Daniel had only been kept away through manipulation. That Eleanor's interference was the true disruption in Leo's life. When it was Eleanor's turn, she played her part masterfully, a concerned grandmother voicing her deep fear for Leo's future. "I only want what's best for my grandson," she said, voice smooth, dripping with faux compassion. "My son was robbed of precious years. Ms. Green made choices that put Leo's well-being at risk. I'm here to ensure he's protected." Amelia sat frozen beside Daniel, her fingernails digging into her palms. The lies rolled off Eleanor's tongue effortlessly. When cross-examination began, Daniel's attorney finally delivered the blow they had prepared for weeks. A secret recording. On the audio, clear as day, Eleanor's own voice could be heard from her meeting with Amelia 3 years prior. Threatening, manipulating, offering her money to disappear. The courtroom fell silent as the judge listened, his brow furrowing. Eleanor's composure finally cracked for the briefest second, her eyes narrowing, her jaw tightening. The perfect mask slipped. Daniel whispered softly, his eyes locked on his mother. "Checkmate." The hearing adjourned for the day, but the message was clear. Eleanor's case was weakening. Outside the courthouse, as reporters buzzed around them like vultures, Daniel kept Amelia and Leo shielded, refusing to answer any questions. When they reached the car, Amelia collapsed into the seat, her chest heaving with quiet sobs of relief and exhaustion. Daniel sat beside her, gripping her hand tightly. "We're not finished yet," he whispered, "but we're winning." Amelia nodded through her tears. "I couldn't have done this alone." Daniel leaned in closer, his voice a soft promise. "You'll never have to again." Chapter 9, The Power Play. For the first time in her life, Eleanor Brooks found herself losing control. Her carefully built empire of manipulation, the one that had kept Daniel obedient and Amelia crushed, was slipping through her fingers. And worse, she knew exactly who had turned the tide. Her son. Daniel sat in his penthouse office, the city glittering behind him. The courtroom victory wasn't yet final, but the recording had cracked Eleanor's pristine armor wide open. Mark paced behind him. "Her legal team's been quiet for 3 days now. That's not like your mother." "She's regrouping," Daniel said calmly. "Calculating her next move." Mark crossed his arms. "You think she'll back off?" Daniel's jaw tensed. Not voluntarily. And then, as if summoned, his phone buzzed. The caller ID made Mark's brows rise. "Speak of the devil," Daniel answered, his voice cool. "Mother." Eleanor's voice came smooth but edged with something new. Restraint. "Daniel, we need to talk." "We already did," Daniel replied. "Not like this, privately." Daniel paused for only a moment. "Fine. My office. Tonight." When Eleanor entered the penthouse that evening, she was as composed as ever. Silk gloves, tailored coat, and that signature perfume that always preceded her. But beneath the surface, Daniel saw it. The fracture. The faint crack in her armor. He gestured to the chair across from his desk. "Have a seat." She sat, legs crossed delicately, observing him with careful eyes. "You've certainly grown bold." Daniel didn't flinch. "I learned from the best." A faint smile tugged at the corner of her lips. "You've backed me into a corner, I'll give you that." "That wasn't the goal," Daniel said coldly. "The goal was to protect my son." Eleanor inhaled slowly. "Your alleged son." Daniel's voice sharpened. "Don't. The judge already accepted the DNA test." Eleanor's calm wavered for a fraction of a second. "So what now, Daniel? You'll parade me in front of the media? Destroy the Brooks name? Tear down the very empire you stand on?" "If I have to," Daniel said simply, "because my son comes before your reputation. And so does Amelia." Eleanor studied him for a long moment, almost as if sizing up a new opponent. "She'll ruin you eventually, you know," she said softly, her voice almost maternal. "Women like her always do. They get inside your head. inside your emotions. They make you soft." Daniel leaned forward, his voice iron. "No, Mother, she's the only one who ever made me human." The words landed hard. For the first time, Eleanor's eyes flickered, not with anger, but something closer to recognition. As if, deep down, she understood exactly what she had lost long ago. Daniel continued, his tone final. "This is how it ends. You will drop the petition. You will issue a full statement clearing Amelia of all accusations, and you will stay away from both of them." "And if I don't?" she asked, though her voice was thinner now. Daniel's eyes never wavered. "Then I release everything. The recording, the financial blackmail files I found, the board members who will turn on you the moment your corruption becomes public record." He paused, lowering his voice into a quiet dagger. "The Brooks name won't just be damaged, Mother. It'll be finished." The silence hung between them, thick as concrete. Finally, Eleanor exhaled, the fight, for now, drained from her face. "You always did have my ruthlessness," she whispered, "but you never had my stomach for sacrifice." "No," Daniel agreed softly, "because I finally learned what's worth keeping." After a long, breathless pause, Eleanor finally nodded. "Very well." 2 days later, Eleanor's attorneys officially withdrew the custody petition. The statement she issued was brief, but effective. "After careful reflection, I believe Leo's best interests are served by remaining in the care of his parents, Daniel Brooks and Amelia Green." The war was over. That evening, Daniel returned to Amelia's apartment. Leo was asleep on the couch, his tiny chest rising and falling peacefully. Amelia stood near the window, her arms wrapped around herself, her quiet form framed by the soft city lights outside. When she heard Daniel enter, she turned slowly. "It's done," he said quietly. Amelia's breath caught. "She dropped it?" He nodded. "All of it." Tears filled her eyes, but this time they were not from fear, not from exhaustion. Relief. Pure, shaking relief. She covered her mouth, trying to hold it in. But when Daniel crossed the room and wrapped his arms around her, the walls inside her finally collapsed. She broke down in his arms, crying silently into his chest. His hands held her tightly, grounding her as her body trembled with months of fear finally melting away. Daniel whispered softly against her hair. "I promised I wouldn't let her take him, and I never will." Amelia clutched his shirt tighter, her voice breaking against his chest. "You stayed." Daniel pulled back just enough to meet her eyes. "I always will." Chapter 10. The Family We Chose. 1 year later. The summer air was warm as Amelia stood at the edge of the park, watching the scene before her like something from a dream she never dared to imagine. Leo ran through the grass, his laughter carrying on the breeze. His small arms flailed as he darted toward Daniel, who pretended to chase him with exaggerated clumsiness. "I'm gonna get you," Daniel called, his voice playful. Leo shrieked with joy, squealing as his father caught him mid-run and lifted him high into the air. The boy's laughter echoed like music, pure and bright. Amelia pressed a hand to her chest, blinking back the tears that still came so easily these days, but now for different reasons. Happiness. Real, grounded, fragile, beautiful happiness. Daniel set Leo down gently, ruffling his hair. The two shared a quiet exchange she couldn't hear, but it made her heart swell. It was simple, easy, something ordinary, and yet for them, it was everything. Daniel looked over and caught Amelia watching. He smiled, not with any expectation or pressure, but with that quiet confidence that had filled him more and more since the war ended. "I'm here," that smile always seemed to say, "and I'm not leaving." Amelia returned the smile and made her way to the bench where Daniel was now sitting, catching his breath from the pretend chase. "You're getting old," she teased softly, handing him a bottle of water. Daniel took it with a grin. "I'm getting wiser. Leo just runs like he's powered by rocket fuel." They both laughed as Leo plopped down in the grass nearby, talking to himself as he arranged sticks into some elaborate fort. Daniel glanced at Amelia then, his voice lowering. "Does it still scare you?" She knew what he meant. And she didn't answer right away. The truth was, sometimes it did. Sometimes in the quiet of the night, when Leo was asleep and the house was still, She would lie awake wondering if it could all somehow fall apart again. But she had also learned something else in the past year. Fear doesn't have to rule you. It's getting easier, she finally whispered, because every day you keep showing up. Daniel reached for her hand, his thumb gently brushing against her knuckles. And I always will. She smiled, her throat tightening with emotion. You know, I never thought we'd have this. Daniel's voice was tender. Neither did I, but sometimes family isn't something that survives because it's perfect. It survives because we choose it, every single day. Amelia's heart swelled. They had survived her fears, his mother's war, years of pain and distance. But through it all, Daniel had fought for their son. For her. For something real. This wasn't the fairy tale she once dreamed of when she was younger. It was better, because it was earned. Leo ran up then, cheeks flushed and hair sticking to his forehead. Mommy, Daddy, look, he beamed, holding up a crooked little stick tower. I made us a house. Amelia felt her throat catch as she knelt beside him. It's beautiful, sweetheart. Daniel knelt too, adding softly, just like our real one. Leo grinned, not fully understanding the deeper meaning in his father's voice, but sensing the warmth that surrounded him. And in that small moment, in that tiny park, under the soft glow of the setting sun, they were a family. Not because of blood, not because of wealth, but because they had chosen each other. Every single day. Sometimes, life doesn't give us what we expect. It gives us loss, regret, silence where there should have been words, distance where there should have been arms wide open. For 3 years, Daniel Brooks lost the most precious thing a man could lose: time. Time with his son, time with the woman who once believed in him, time stolen by fear, control, and choices neither of them fully made. But life has a strange way of offering second chances to those brave enough to fight for them. Daniel fought, not with money or power, but with something much rarer: patience, steadiness. A promise that didn't fade when things grew hard. And Amelia, though afraid, though scarred, dared to believe again. And in the middle of it all was Leo, the small boy who unknowingly healed them both simply by being loved. Love isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet. The way a father kneels to match his son's height. The way a mother finally exhales after years of holding her breath. The way two people, once broken apart, slowly rebuild something stronger than what was lost. Family isn't defined by perfection but by choosing each other, again and again. If this story touched your heart, remind someone you love today. No matter how far life pulls us apart, love can still bring us home. And if you believe in second chances, if you believe love is worth fighting for, share this story with someone who needs that hope tonight.